In June 1943, Los Angeles became the epicenter of a violent conflict known as the Zoot Riots. This was a series of attacks primarily against young Mexican-American men who wore oversized suits called Zoot suits. These riots weren't just random acts of violence. They were fueled by racial tensions, wartime anxieties, and deep-seated prejudice. It all started during World War II. While American soldiers were fighting overseas, tensions were rising back home. In cities like Los Angeles, Mexican Americans, with many that had been born and raised in the U.S., faced intense discrimination. At the same time, young Chicanos had developed their own cultural identity, one that revolved around jazz, rebellion, and style. The Zoot suit, with its baggy pants, long coats, and flamboyant appearance, became a symbol of that identity. But to many white Americans, including military personnel stationed in Los Angeles, these suits represented defiance. In their eyes, wearing flashy clothing during wartime, when fabric was being rationed, was seen as unpatriotic. This was the excuse some were looking for. The spark that ignited the riots came on June 3, 1943. A group of U.S. sailors claimed they were attacked by a gang of Mexican-American youths. Whether the incident actually happened the way they described is still debated, but what followed was undeniable. Over the next several days, mobs of white servicemen, along with some local civilians, took to the streets in search of anyone wearing a Zoot suit. These mobs brutally beat young Mexican Americans, stripped them of their suits, and left them in the streets, often while police stood by and did nothing. Shockingly, many of the victims, rather than the attackers, were arrested. The violence soon spread beyond Mexican Americans to include Black and Filipino youth, anyone who fit the image of a so-called Zoot suiter. Despite the chaos, the mainstream media largely downplayed the riots, often blaming the victims. It wasn't until national attention turned to the attacks that officials finally took action. Military leaders eventually banned servicemen from entering Los Angeles, and the riots came to an end. But the scars remained. The Zoot suit riots were more than just a clash over fashion. They exposed the racial injustices embedded in American society and highlighted how deep discrimination ran.
Even today, the riots serve as a reminder of how cultural identity can be weaponized and how dangerous unchecked prejudice can become. The story of the Zoot Suit riots isn't just about the past, it's a lesson for the present and future.